So the title of the talk today is 2 Ways to Practice Self-Inquiry. Two ways. So I never really practiced self-inquiry in the sense that I would go in and ask myself, who am I? Who am I? So I wouldn't really go in. I think that more traditional way that Ramana taught it, and it's generally taught, is that you go in, you access your thoughts and your feelings, and then you ask whose thoughts and feelings are that. So you're keeping the who am I question in mind at all times. Who am I? Who am I? And, you know, so a feeling comes up where I am angry. So you feel angry. And then it's who feels angry? And it's not an ignoring of the feelings, it's a feeling of the feelings. So you feel anger, say, in the solar plexus. And it's the registration of that. And then who is that feeling appearing for? Whose feeling is that? So self-inquiry is always going back to whose feelings is it? Whose thoughts is it? Who am I at the core of all of this? And then through the repetition of this question, the idea is that everything gets peeled away. All illusions get peeled away until it's revealed who you truly are. And who you truly are is absolute mystery. It's not something nameable. It's not something graspable. It's not something you can call consciousness or I am, even though I do repetitively call it that, and I call it the unknown and emptiness and the absolute. So it's not not actually known in words. It's mystery. So you come back to formlessness, that who you are is not a thing. And by not being a thing, you're all things simultaneously. It's absolute love. Not the human emotion or feeling of love, but a very deep, primal love of absolute at-homeness. And you could call that love a feeling, but also not a feeling. It's an expression that's appearing in this, but it's also not a feeling of an expression. That you can't find the love or capture the love like the feeling. But it seems to be a feeling that appears through the heart, but it's actually not. It's like consciousness. All disappears in exploration. So this is the more traditional way to practice who am I. So that's the number one way, is that every time you have a thought, a feeling, or an experience, or an idea, you keep inquiring, who is that feeling appearing for? Who has those feelings? Who owns those feelings? And the second way, I think there's also lots more ways to practice self-inquiry, but the second way to practice self-inquiry is actually going to satsang, meeting in truth. And what happens in satsang is it's kind of done for you. But when you really go into it, who is the difference between a teacher doing it and you doing it. So in satsang, the teacher is overtly questioning who you are and pointing you back to something beyond thoughts, feelings, form, body, perceptions, and questioning continuously. And that's inadvertently doing it for you. So you might notice you go to talks and then the silence takes over, or there's awakenings, or there's something that is revealed, even if it's seemingly momentarily. So those are the two different ways in which self-inquiry can be done. I can imagine more ways in which it can be done. But this is fundamental ways. Who am I? And everything needs to be questioned. There's no place which can remain you. So it means really getting the gunk out of the eyes. Obviously, we can't see all the conditions and the habits of this body, but it's really seeing the illusions. So I can't stress enough that every thought, feeling, experience, sensation is illusory. It's not the truth of the situation. What's happening in most people is that they're totally believing in the story of them and every feeling they're having. If they've had therapy, maybe they question their feeling a lot more. But most people haven't had therapy. Most people don't do self-investigation. Most people are just in reactivity, believing their thoughts, their feelings, and emotions. And they don't notice the changes that are happening in their feelings and how their stories are changing, how their mind is changing, and then how they're trying to fit that into a solid sense of self. They're just in reaction, believing it's true. I remember I've told this story many times, but I shall tell it again because satsang is simply repetition in silence, repetition in silence, which is total contradiction. So I remember my mum invited me to an NHS, National Healthcare System, carers meeting. So this is people that are carers for people who have family members that are mentally ill or Alzheimer's. And she invited me to kind of do meditation. I'm not really a meditation teacher, but I have studied, obviously, meditation a lot. And so it's not complex for me to teach. So I started off talking to people about how what they think and what they feel isn't necessarily the truth of the situation. And I thought I was going in at vita light. I thought that, you know, I was being super uncomplex. Like I was like, so if you feel angry with someone because, you know, they did something, that this isn't, it's not necessarily true that that person has done something very wrong. It might be your thoughts and your feelings. And oh my goodness, the audience started to get enraged. These people had never explored themselves or the nature of their thoughts or feelings or experiences. They're like, what do you mean my anger isn't real? The NHS has done this and done that to me and my son. And I was like, oh. And I was like, yeah, this is not going well. And my friend, luckily, who also was a teacher, stood up and helped me and like explained to people that they thought. So these people didn't even realize that they thought. They realized that they thought like calculating a maths subject, but they didn't realize that anger could be a thought or that anger was a feeling. They thought it was a fact. They thought it was out there and something that someone did. They were angry because of what someone did, and the anger was like out there. And because I've been into this subject for so long, I'd completely forgotten that people didn't even realize that they were thinking, and that their thoughts and their emotions were interlaced, and that the anger was actually all inside them, and that they were viewing something with anger. They just thought that the anger was the situation. So somebody was rude to them, and then they were like, it's not me that's angry as such, even though they could describe themselves. It's like, yeah, if someone does that to you, that's what happens, anger. It was really interesting for me to experience. And so when my friends started explaining that they're thinking, it settled them down. And then we sort of like went on to meditation. But my point to the whole story is that these illusions have to be seen through. So none of this is you, you know, you start off with everything you think and feel being real and being something that's happening in the flow of life. Then you begin to realize that everything is projection. But then in each moment, there has to be a noticing of what your body mind's doing, and restraining or pulling back from getting involved in that. When you have high reactivity, the person and the feelings become one. Like, I am angry because you did this. And so there has to be a noticing of this in all details, you know, so being shameful, and seeing or being guilty or having stress, and registering that that's the experience, and then saying, who am I? Is that who I am? When you're just lost in it, then you automatically are believing it's who you are. Yeah, that's complex. So it's like really seeing the detail of experience, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, and deeply knowing that none of them are who you are. When you're in reactivity, so you're, even if it's being in love with someone, when you're taking it to be a truth that you might not even realize you're taking to be a truth, you're so involved in it, it becomes part of you, and then this attachment seeking happens. In a way, maybe it's already happened, the attachment of the seeking. You're making yourself into a form. I am someone that's in love. So it's seeing that isn't who you are. Who you are is the still, present looking. You're not someone that's in love. You're not someone that is feeling joy. You're not somebody that's feeling unhappy. You're not someone that's feeling stressed or feeling tired. Who you are is presence, which is not tired, joyful, peaceful, angry, happy. It's no expression. It doesn't mean working out all the habits and the conditions of the body. It's a movement from identification, seeking to make form out of it, back to a stillness which is ever looking and watchful. Yeah. So now, just in this explanation, in a way, I've done self-inquiry for you. Because me questioning these dynamics that people have in general, it's automatically questioning in you who you are. So next time you're by yourself, maybe a thought will arise when you're Yeah, maybe a thought will rise when you are identified or feeling very reactive. The reactivity, it's not reactivity is the problem, it's the seeking and the identification. That's hard to split out. Maybe next time that's arising, there'll be a moment's break where it's, is this who I am? When you're attached to it and seeking to make form out of it, then everything becomes very important. And that's what I mean by reactivity. But reactivity is very complex. So say if you're on your bike and, you know, there's nearly a crash, it's important that there's reactivity and not like, who am I? Or if somebody's being violent to another person, it's important that you're not like, who am I? And not, so it's not that type of reactivity. It's the reactivity that's creating form, that this is who I am. And I have to defend it with my life. So everything becomes super important. So if Lisa doesn't listen to me or hear me or look at me or do this or do that, then I'm going to die. That doesn't feel like that, but it feels like I'm taking away part of your form. I'm taking away part of who you are. And as something that wants to survive, that can become so insulting. So it's really the disidentification with any form. And identification is seeking to be a form. I am good, I am bad, I am right, I'm better than. Seeking is trying to, is to me by definition, trying to make form out of something. I am this body, I'm better than, I'm worse than. I am angry. All of this is making you a form, whereas really there is anger arising, there is happiness arising, there is body arising, and none of it is who you are. Who you are is this vast consciousness, which is totally empty, formless, absolute mystery, no things, all things, absolute love. In a way, consciousness doesn't exist and the I am doesn't exist. But we say these words as slides to the mystery of what you are. The looking, the perceiver, which isn't separate from perception. And the perceiver is it's like a slide. Perceiver is totally empty. Total vast emptiness. And the everything part is total love. Absolute love, baby. So beautiful speaking about non-duality. I don't know if this is what happens for other speakers, but by speaking about it, by speaking about it in silence with other people, it's such love arises. It's like it amplifies the love in a way. Like life really wants this expressed. Yeah, it was so beautiful. So in the practice of who am I, you also have to question who is the doer. And this is where it becomes like the Pac-Man. You know, when the Pac-Man dies, he eats himself. His mouth goes backwards and consumes himself until he disappears. So what also needs to get questioned is doership. So I am acting. Who is acting? I am creating. Who is creating? I am moving my arm. Who is moving the arm? I am self-inquiring. Who is self-inquiring? And when you really delve deep into that, it's seen that nobody is acting. Nobody is self-inquiring. So the idea that you're practicing self-inquiry is also illusory. There is nobody that could practice self-inquiry, yet practice appears for nobody by nobody. You also question the past. Who existed in the last moment? Who exists in the next moment? Who was born? Who's lived a life? Who's suffered? All these questions. And you keep going, who? Who is that? And then it begins to be seen that nobody's lived a life. Nobody's had memories. Nobody's suffered or woken up or not woken up. What you are is the stillness of this moment, which has never moved. And in that, memories, images, thoughts, ideas arise in order to create this phenomenal experience, but they're not actually something that's happening. They're not the truth. They're seemingly happening, but they're not the truth. The truth is empty looking. Empty looking. This vast, empty looking. Who are you? Boop, 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 boop. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, you can ask through Telegram.